Miles and miles of yellow sand, treeless mountain ridges, and scorching hot sun over your head. And suddenly, something you'd never expect to come across in a barren desert. A small group of overexcited people. They're as happy as you would be if you'd won a lottery. They've just found an ancient tomb, once flooded with its walls in bad shape. But the stuff they discovered inside proves that this is the burial site of one of Egypt's most mysterious pharaohs. Historians have been hunting for his tomb for years, but no one expected it to hide ancient treasures. Fast forward. After careful examination of the site, Egyptian officials have announced the discovery of the tomb of King Thutmos II. It's the last missing tomb from Egypt's 18th dynasty. And this is also the first royal tomb found since King Tutankhamun's was discovered in 1922, in more than 100 years. A team of Egyptian and British archaeologists found the tomb in the Theban Mountains area, west of Luxor, near the famous Valley of the Kings. Before this, the site was only known as Tomb C4, but during their excavation, the team found clear evidence proving it belonged to King Thutmos II. Archaeologists actually found the entrance and main tunnel leading to the tomb in 2022. But at first, they thought it belonged to a queen because it was near the graves of Thutmos III's wives. It was also close to Queen Hatshepsut's tomb. Originally, it was prepared for her when she was just a royal wife, but everything changed when she became pharaoh. But we'll talk about this twist of fate a little later. But soon they realized that their discovery was much more significant. They found alabaster jars with Thutmos II's name and the words "deceased king" written on them. That's when they realized that the tomb was actually his final resting place. Sadly, Thutmos II's tomb has seen better days. According to the head of Egypt's antiquities sector and the leader of the Egyptian excavation team, the tomb suffered major damage from ancient floods not long after the pharaoh's death. Water swept through the burial chamber, likely destroying or displacing many of the original artifacts. Much of what had been once inside the tomb was moved elsewhere in an attempt to salvage it. The researchers found out that the tomb had a basic design, with an entrance, a sloping main corridor, and a burial chamber. The corridor was coated in white plaster and rose about 4.5 feet above the floor of the burial chamber. A large staircase and a very large descending corridor of the tomb indicated its grandeur. It took the team a long time to navigate through, though, as the tomb was blocked by flood debris and collapsed ceilings. Only after crawling through a 32-foot passageway with a small 16-inch gap at the top, the worst nightmare for those of us with claustrophobia, were they able to reach the burial chamber. There, they were in for another surprise. They cleared the debris, expecting to find the crushed remains of a burial beneath. But the tomb turned out to be completely empty, and it was not due to robbery. It had been deliberately emptied. The researchers soon realized that the tomb had been flooded since it had been built underneath a waterfall. It happened just a few years after the king's burial, so the contents of the tomb were moved to another location. That's why there was a second corridor in the tomb. It was most likely made to help remove King Thutmos II's body from his flooded tomb. Despite the damage, the excavation team made some really exciting discoveries. They found traces of mortar decorated with blue inscriptions, yellow stars, and fragments from the Book of Amduat, one of the most significant funerary texts in ancient Egypt. The book was meant to guide the deceased through the underworld, ensuring a safe journey to the afterlife. Now, how about we sneak a peek at ancient Egypt's 18th dynasty? It was all about conquering lands, expanding the empire, and building jaw-dropping monuments. Some of the biggest names from that era, Thutmos I and Thutmos III, both legendary warrior kings who left their mark in history. Thutmos I was a fierce fighter who led major military campaigns, pushing Egypt's border further south than ever before, all the way to the fourth cataract of the Nile. His victories gave Egypt access to new trade routes, stronger political ties, and more wealth. His conquests were so significant that they were recorded in the tombs of his top officials. Thutmos III, sometimes called Thutmose the Great, took things even further. He was not only an incredible military strategist, but also the commander of Pharaoh Hatshepsut's armies before becoming king himself. He led between 17 and 20 military campaigns, winning every single one and expanding Egypt's empire to its peak. He even created the world's first navy. Thutmose III is often remembered as Egypt's greatest warrior pharaoh. And sandwiched between these two powerhouses was Thutmose II, a pharaoh who doesn't get nearly as much attention. Hey, the middle child, right? His reign lasted only about 5 years before he passed away at around age 30 in 1479 BCE. He is kind of a mystery. No one really knows what he accomplished. For the longest time, even the location of his burial site was totally unknown. His body was actually found in the 19th century. It was just lying around in the mortuary temple of Deir el-Bahari, in a secret chamber where priests used to hide royal mummies centuries after their original tombs were looted by grave robbers. In other words, Thutmose II's body must have been moved from his original resting place at some point in history to protect it. During his lifetime, Thutmose II made at least one major impact on Egyptian history. He married his half-sister Hatshepsut. That might not sound like a big deal, but it helped her become Egypt's greatest female pharaoh after he passed. The catch? She kept her stepson, Thutmose III, off the throne for decades. When he finally took power, he erased her name from history out of spite. And still, Hatshepsut is one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, no matter if you're talking about a man or a woman. She brought a lot of wealth and art to Egypt. She led a big trading trip to a place called Punt, where she brought back things like gold, ebony, and incense. She also made sure her name lasted by building amazing structures that we can still see today. At Karnak, she added huge obelisks. One of them is still standing tall. She also was the one to build the Temple of Deir el-Bahari with its countless columns. She was buried there. Interestingly, Hatshepsut was often shown in art as a man, with muscles and a beard, like how pharaohs were usually depicted. But she made sure there was always something in the artwork that reminded people she was a woman, like calling herself Daughter of Re, or His Majesty herself. When she passed away in 1458 BCE, Egypt wouldn't have a female ruler as powerful as her until Cleopatra, about 1400 years later. According to Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities Secretary General, isn't that a mouthful? Hatshepsut's name actually appears in Thutmose II's tomb, meaning she might have even handled his burial. As for their final resting places, well, Hatshepsut was buried in the Valley of the Kings, and Thutmose II's mummy is now in the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, alongside other ancient Egyptian rulers. It gives visitors a rare chance to see the remains of a nearly forgotten pharaoh. Now, experts consider the discovery of his tomb to be one of the most significant in recent years. The artifacts found there add important details to our understanding of the history of the region and Thutmose II's rule. And even though the tomb's design is fairly simple and follows the same architectural style preferred by later Egyptian rulers, its historical importance is undeniable. In any case, the mission isn't over yet. Archaeologists are now focusing on solving another mystery. Where did the rest of the tomb's contents end up? The team is determined to continue their search. Who knows what other secrets they will uncover that have remained hidden beneath the sands for thousands of years.
Egyptologists have been digging around every inch of the Great Pyramid for ages. Yet somehow, they overlooked this stunning pink granite bathtub buried a few miles next to it. And here's the deal. This mysterious oval tube lying next to the Khufu pyramid for years may provide evidence that the Egyptians built the pyramids not only for monumental purposes, but also to generate electricity, experimenting with it long before Alessandro Volta and Thomas Edison. The Giza Plateau is famous for its three pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. But there are also two smaller foundations next to them. the unfinished North Pyramid of Zayat el-Aryan, and the Layer Pyramid. Some researchers say these buildings were never finished, while others think they were destroyed for more mysterious reasons. One of these reasons might have to do with the original usage of the Giza pyramids, the idea that they were used as an electricity generator. To connect these dots, we need to go back to the beginning of the 20th century. That's when an Italian architect and Egyptologist named Alessandro Barsanti decided to examine the Zayat el-Aryan pyramid. Near the site, he noticed something unusual: scattered granite fragments. To a casual passerby, these might have seemed insignificant, but Barsanti recognized the signs. You see, ancient Egyptians often used sites to prepare stones before transporting them to their final destinations. The fact that there was granite on the ground intrigued him. Granite was a more expensive material than the limestone typically used for pyramids, which suggested that it might have been intended for an important and possibly hidden structure. At a depth of 68 feet, they encountered a huge pink granite block. He kept going with the excavations, and they revealed ancient inscriptions carved into the stones. They sent the drawing to experts, but no one could decipher what they meant. Were they instruction sets to something? That's when Barsanti made his biggest discovery. He found an oval-shaped vat carved from pink granite and polished to a mirror-like finish. The thing is, the vat had been carefully sealed. When they opened it, they found a thin black residue along the walls. I'm thinking something in the lines of a black oily substance. This discovery raised many questions for him. It didn't make sense to him that ancient Egyptians would go above and beyond to seal and protect this strange vat. By 1911, Barsanti had to abandon his effort to figure out what was the deal with that mysterious pit. But his findings intrigued researchers all over the world, and they've got their own opinions about it. One of these modern theories suggests that the other pyramids could have been used as a part of a bigger whole. It suggests that the Khufu pyramid was actually used as a water pump designed to irrigate the desert area. Apparently, the pyramid's internal chambers would function as a hydraulic system. In the 1990s, an engineer took this theory seriously and studied the pyramid's subterranean chamber. Surprisingly, he found actual signs of water damage. Apparently, the pyramid generated powerful compression waves, aka pulses, that could create electricity. This raised an important question. Could the ancient Egyptians have used the pyramids as a generator in order to produce electricity? On paper, that was proven to be possible. But hey, agreeing on the original use of the pyramids is probably one of the most difficult things in the world. So, we're still not 100% sure about this. Apart from that, Egypt is a playground for important discoveries regarding humanity's past. I mean, scientists have just discovered what looks like a cosmic command center, similar to that room from the Doctor Strange movies. They discovered an L-shaped astronomical observatory, measuring around 9,000 square feet, dating back to the 6th century BCE. Definitely the first and largest of its kind from that era. The mud brick structure housed tools used for calculating dates related to ancient Egyptian rites, royal coronations, and agricultural plans. This observatory is located in the archaeological site known as the Temple of Pharaoh, just 50 miles east of Alexandria. It's pretty impressive. The structure was designed so that you'd get inside the room through an east-facing entrance. This way, you'd get to see the sunrise. Once inside, you'd find a pretty huge shadow clock, used to tell time by tracking the movement of shadows inside the room. This variant of a sundial clock was nearly 16 feet long. That was quite an exciting discovery. Another interesting one was that scientists and Egyptologists have discovered the first ever pregnant mummy. Now, even if we know quite a lot about mummification processes, we keep making discoveries that open new doors into the lives of ancient Egyptians. It took so long for someone to find out this mummy was expecting at the time she was embalmed because she was placed in a male's coffin. More specifically, a male priest. Historians say that during the 19th century, a lot of traders mixed coffins up in order to sell them. Yes, that means they opened them and switched mummies to please their buyers. It was a complete surprise because they were hoping to study more about ancient health issues when they opened this coffin up. But they had another special research on their hands: prenatal practices in ancient Egypt. This mummified woman, who lived about 2,000 years ago, was from 20 to 30 years old when she passed away. She was found in Thebes, and her remains were incredibly well preserved. You see, mummification recipes varied across Egypt. In this woman's case, researchers could tell she was a member of the high society since she was buried with special amulets. But since mummification methodologies differed so much between cities and time periods, they still have to dig further to understand why she was embalmed along with her baby. Speaking of mummies, scientists were digging up a final resting place in Sakara, also in Egypt, and they unearthed two embalming workshops. One was for humans and the other for sacred animals. Apparently, the workshops date back to about 2,400 years ago. They were equipped with stone beds, clay pots, and ritual vessels. Everything you needed to mummify. But that's not all. Archaeologists also stumbled upon cheese stored in jars behind tombs that were over 3,000 years old. Yep, cheese. This shows that the ancient Egyptians were pretty savvy when it came to preserving food, too. They knew how to store stuff for the long haul, not just the mummies. It really shows how they applied their preservation skills to both food and bodies, giving us a glimpse into their impressive technological know-how. Scientists have also found one of Egypt's oldest complete mummies, and to their surprise, it was completely covered in gold. You see, Egyptian mummies covered in gold are already a rare thing, but they weren't expecting it to be the oldest one ever found. The mummy was quite well preserved, and they could identify that it was the remains of a wealthy man called Hekashepes. Many symbols show that he was important and wealthy, like the band he wore on his head and the bracelet on his chest. He was also dressed in a tunic wrapped with a belt, which was a way to preserve the good appearance of a person after they passed away. To reveal it, they had to open the final resting place with mortar. Basically, it was like they were opening a time machine, just as the ancient Egyptians did 4,300 years ago. If you think about it, it's almost like entering a time capsule. Enough about mummies. Scientists also found something very exciting hovering above the pyramids. They had to use a fancy top-notch radar known as LARID, aka Low Altitude Long Range Ionospheric Radar, which can see these invisible waves far away into the sky. LARID helped them discover giant plasma bubbles floating in the air above the pyramids. These bubbles are called plasma bubbles, and they wreak havoc on modern technologies. I mean, they can disrupt GPS and phone signals for hundreds of kilometers in diameter from where they're located. These bubbles are massive, sometimes as big as cities, and they're caused by the sudden depletion of charged particles in the ionosphere. So, instead of spreading out evenly throughout the ionosphere, they stick together in this wave-like form. This was a pretty important discovery because it can help scientists understand how to prevent these waves from messing with our technology.
Something strange is lurking beneath the sands of Giza, and scientists have no idea what it is. Archaeologists just found a hidden structure near the Great Pyramid using advanced ground scanning technology. What's inside? Nobody knows, but excavations are already underway. The Great Pyramid of Giza is one of the most famous monuments on Earth, but it doesn't stand alone. It's surrounded by an ancient necropolis, a massive royal graveyard filled with tombs and monuments. They belong to pharaohs, nobles, and other high-ranking officials. Most of these tombs are above the ground. They're called mastabas, rectangular, flat-roofed tombs built from limestone or mud brick, and they've been studied for decades. But from old movies, we know that these weren't simple graves. They have deep vertical shafts leading to underground burial chambers, where the past was sealed away for eternity. And recently, Archaeologists found one curious empty space in the cemetery, a completely unexplored patch of ground. No mastabas, no visible ruins, nada. For years they ignored it, but between 2021 and 2023, they decided to investigate. They didn't dig though. Instead, they used a technology that kind of acts like X-rays for the ground. These radars let scientists see the secrets hidden there. And there was something hidden beneath the sand, something deliberately buried and forgotten. A two-part underground structure. One part was shallow and L-shaped. It's about 33 feet long and buried just 6.5 feet deep. But below that, a deeper, more mysterious anomaly, a structure completely different from anything else in the area. They called it a highly resistive anomaly, which means it's dense and solid, likely made of stone, sand, or even metal. And still, no one has a clue what's inside it. Now, it's clear that humans made the L shape. It wasn't formed by nature. And the shallower structure might have been an entrance to whatever is hidden below. But they only have some theories about what might be hidden there. It's also filled with sand and gravel. It was probably deliberately backfilled after its construction, perhaps to preserve this. Why? Well, we don't know yet. The archaeological team will need to excavate to understand what exactly this thing was and why it was built. The first guess is a lost burial chamber. Many tombs in Giza have underground burial sites, but most have clear surface markers. This one, for some reason, has nothing. But it could be one of them. The second guess is an ancient offering chapel. Egyptologists know that some chapels were built in this shape, but usually they were above ground, not buried like this. And finally, it might be something we've never seen before. If this turns out to be a new type of structure, it could rewrite what we know about the burials of pharaohs. The only way to know for sure is to dig it up. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Excavations are already underway. Archaeologists are racing against time to uncover the truth. But there's a real danger there too. Giza's fragile ancient structures need to be handled carefully. Otherwise, they could be damaged beyond repair. So all we can do is wait for the truth. Now, these tombs always held fascinating mysteries. Unfortunately, we'll never learn tons of these mysteries because of some relentless tomb robbers. Egyptian tombs were built to guard the bodies for eternity. But that absolutely didn't stop people from breaking in and stealing everything valuable inside. They've been bothering these ancient sites for thousands of years, starting way back in Pharaoh's times. Many of the most famous tombs, including those in Giza, Sakara, and the Valley of the Kings, were looted. It was a common practice in ancient Egypt. And they were serious about this whole thing. They dug secret tunnels to bypass traps and walls, bribed or threatened tomb workers to get inside knowledge, cracked open sarcophagi to grab gold, jewelry, and artifacts. And by the time modern archaeologists got to most of these tombs, they had already been picked clean. The reigning pharaohs got tired of this infuriating nonsense. The Valley of the Kings, the famous burial ground of Egyptian royalty, was supposed to be the ultimate safe zone. Tombs were built deep underground, hidden in the desert. Passages were sealed with giant stone blocks. False doors and traps were added to confuse thieves. Even curses were written on the walls, warnings of horrible endings for anyone who dared to disturb the tomb, which is exactly where we got all those horror stories about mummies from. Spoiler alert, none of it worked. Most tombs in the Valley of the Kings were fully robbed within 100 years of being sealed. Even King Tutankhamun's tomb, one of the most famous in history, was broken into twice in ancient times. Some of them decided to try and fight back. The New Kingdom rulers built hidden unmarked tombs in a way that should have prevented the looters from finding them, but didn't work. Some pharaohs, like Ramses II, were moved in secret to prevent their bodies from being stolen. Nope, didn't matter. The grave robbers always won. That's because tomb raiders weren't just random thieves. They were skilled, organized, and well-connected. They knew exactly where to look. Many were the ones who had built these sites in the first place, and they knew where the entrances were. If they couldn't smash through the doors, they'd dig through the walls, floors, and even ceilings to break inside. They also worked fast. often within a few years after the tombs were sealed, before anyone forgot where the valuable stuff was. The Khufu's pyramid, the one that's next to this newly discovered structure, was looted long before modern times. The one thing left inside when explorers got there? An empty granite box where the sarcophagus used to be. Unfortunately, it's not just about gold. History itself gets stolen during these raids. Ancient Egyptians wrote detailed records of what exactly and where they buried. So when archaeologists compare these lists to what's found, they can see what's missing, which is often everything valuable. Most artifacts don't end up in museums. They just disappear into private collections, where they can never be studied again. Which is, of course, completely unfair. In fact, a few countries have had enough and started passing laws to take historical artifacts back from private collectors. In Italy, if you own an ancient Roman artifact, you must prove you got it legally. China is actively hunting down stolen artifacts, and they must find ways to retrieve it back from the Western collectors. In Egypt, they passed new laws making it illegal for private citizens to own any ancient Egyptian artifacts at all. Other countries, like the US, the UK, Germany, or Switzerland, are completely fine with rich guys owning their history. The British Museum is built on looted things. European empires invaded half the planet and took whatever they wanted back home. Their museums are often full of such stolen artifacts, and unfortunately, they refuse to give most of them back. For example, the Rosetta Stone. It was taken from Egypt by Napoleon's army, then stolen again by the British after they beat the French. Egypt has been demanding to return for years, but they still can't get it back. Or the Parthenon marbles. These magnificent massive Greek structures were taken from the Parthenon in Athens by a British lord in the 19th century. Greece has been begging for them back ever since, but the UK doesn't feel like it. Not to mention tons of Mesoamerican artifacts, scattered in various museums across the world. European explorers raided Mayan and Aztec temples, took statues, jewelry, and sacred objects, and now Mexico is fighting to get them back. Well, wouldn't it be surprising even if this mysterious underground chamber has somehow been looted already? But if it's a newly found place, could it be one of the few that escaped the hands of grave robbers? Could there still be ancient artifacts, untouched for 4,500 years? We can only hope that those guys didn't get there first.
This is not a dune set. This is a very real desert in Niger. Jado was probably built by the nomadic Sao people and is filled with ksars, which are fortified houses made of salt and clay, with giant walls and secret passages. Located deep in the desert, it was once a vital stop for trans-Saharan caravans, but is now a hotspot for smugglers and bandits. The site has been off-limits since 2002 due to its dangers. The origin of the ksars remain a mystery. No archaeological studies have been conducted, leaving many questions unanswered. Even today, shifting sands reveal and conceal parts of these ancient ruins, fueling local speculation about what might still be hidden beneath the desert. Speaking of connective tunnels, scientists were blown away by the discovery of lava tubes in Saudi Arabia. These underground passages form when molten lava cools down. Researchers believe that ancient nomadic groups may have utilized these tunnels to survive the super harsh desert climates. While excavating the tunnels, archaeologists uncovered artifacts, rock art, and skeletal remains. The art and animal bones show that the people who used the tunnels were probably sheep and goat herders. They're still piecing together whether these groups lived in the tunnels for extended periods or just used them as temporary shelters. The Great Pyramid of Giza has been standing for thousands of years, but it's still hiding secrets. Using special scanning technology, scientists found two hidden structures under an ancient burial ground. The first is a shallow L-shaped structure, and below it is a much larger space that could be a final resting place or a chamber. The the smaller structure was filled with sand on purpose, while the deeper one might be an empty chamber. Experts believe the two are connected, possibly as an entrance leading to a secret chamber. This is big news because it might give us some more insight into who built the pyramids and why. The world is full of ancient writing, but some messages refuse to give up their secrets, like the mystery of the Bashplemi tablet. This unusual stone, pulled from a lake in Georgia, is covered in symbols no one can read. Even with modern technology, experts are completely stumped. The tablet is about the size of a book, with 60 symbols carefully carved into its surface, but 39 of them don't match any known language. Some resemble scripts from ancient civilizations in the Middle East, India, and Egypt, but none are an exact match. To make things even trickier, part of the tablet is broken off, meaning a piece of the puzzle is missing forever. To rule out a hoax, scientists studied the tablet closely. They confirmed it's made of vesicular basalt, an extremely tough local rock. Whoever carved these symbols must have been really skilled. Based on similar archaeological finds, experts believe the tablet could date back thousands of years, possibly to the late Bronze or early Iron Age. Some symbols repeat, which could mean they're numbers. Maybe it's an inventory list, a record of battles, or even an offering to the deities. Until someone cracks the code, the Bashplemi tablet remains an unsolved mystery from the depths of history. Experts are still stumped with what this Minoan disc might mean. The Phaistos disc is one of the most mysterious finds from the Minoan civilization. This 6-inch clay object, discovered in 1908, has strange spiral markings that no one has fully decoded yet. The disc has 241 symbols on both sides, showing everything from people and animals to tools and plants. Experts have come up with many theories about what the symbols mean. Some think it's an early form of Greek. Others suggest it's a prayer or a hymn. And some even believe it could be a letter from a king in Anatolia to a Greek ruler. Let's see who will be the first to figure this out. It's always a fun day at an archaeologist's office when they find something as big as a 2,000-year-old marble head. A French archaeologist mission went digging inside an old medieval house near Alexandria in Egypt and found a statue's head depicting an old, possibly ill man. This statue dates from the last Egyptian dynasty before it became part of the Roman Empire, and the site where it was found is associated with the likes of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. For archaeologists, even the smallest finds at this site means a lot. You've heard of Lucy, right? The Australopithecus that was an early ancestor for us humans. Well, scientists found some of her species' footprints somewhere in Tanzania. The so-called Laetoli footprints are over 3 million years old. The trail stretched 88 feet and has about 70 footprints, left behind when a bunch of early humans walked across some wet volcanic ash. What's cool is that these early humans were already walking on 2 feet, like us, not all hunched over like apes. The close spacing of the prints shows they probably had short legs and a shorter stride than we do today. In an ancient Egyptian temple, archaeologists uncovered a shrine unlike any other, a place dedicated to falcons and 2 mysterious deities. One deity had a falcon's head, while the other wore a crown with a sun disk and cow horns. But the most baffling discovery was an inscription that read, "It is improper to boil a head in here." At the heart of the shrine, there are 15 headless falcons carefully arranged on a pedestal, likely as offerings to the falcon-headed deity. One theory suggests the birds were boiled first, perhaps to pluck their feathers, before being placed in the shrine, following the strange rule carved into stone. Archaeologists also found a 13-inch iron harpoon nearby. Its true purpose remains unknown, although the shrine also held remains of fish, mammals, and bird eggs. suggesting that the rituals may have included feasting. And speaking of ancient Egypt, meet Hathor. Scientists named her after the ancient Egyptian deity of motherhood, music, and singing. This wooden statue, housed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, was thought to be just a beautiful artifact, until a surprising secret was uncovered. Using an X-ray machine, experts found a mechanical operating system inside it, with pulleys and axles connecting her shoulder to her left leg. When activated, the system made her hand raise and lower, an engineering marvel from over 3,000 years ago. The statue was created during Egypt's Middle Kingdom, around 1800 BCE, and is often compared to 19th century automata due to its advanced design. It's believed the statue was used in religious ceremonies, symbolizing Hathor's role in dance and music. An unexpected discovery happened in northern Kuwait, where a Kuwaiti-Polish team uncovered a mysterious 7,500-year-old statue. The statue features an elongated skull, no mouth, narrow eyes, and a flattened nose. This feature is thought to be an Ophidian figurine, named after the Greek word for snake, and it was likely made by the Ubaid culture, a civilization known for their pottery skills. While no one knows exactly what role this weird statue played, it might have been linked to rituals or symbolic practices. Some scientists think these figurines, found in homes or final resting places, were tied to important cultural beliefs. We couldn't mention unresolved mysteries of this world without speaking about these elongated skulls. In the deserts of Peru, researchers uncovered 5 ancient skeletons, 2 with unnaturally elongated skulls. While head shaping was common in many cultures, these skulls defy explanation. Local legends tell tales of the so-called gentiles, a mysterious race banished underground by the powerful deities. Some say this is what the skulls represent. Others think this is some type of genetic anomaly, which was confirmed after finding an infant skull, too large to be artificially shaped.
They found the tomb of a royal doctor who lived over 4,000 years ago, a man who held pharaohs' lives in his hands. This man knew secrets that only deities and kings were allowed to hear. And yet, when they opened his tomb in 2024, there was no body, just vivid paintings, untouched by time, and cryptic symbols carved into stone. Who was he, and why was he buried with spells linked to a scorpion deity? The tomb was buried deep beneath the sands of Sakara. The doctor's name was Tete-Nebe-Fu. He lived around 4,100 years ago, during one of Egypt's most mysterious turning points, right at the edge of glory and collapse. These were the final days of Egypt's Old Kingdom. The sun still glinted off freshly built pyramids, but the shadows were already creeping in. The pharaoh, Pepi II, had ruled longer than anyone before him, 90 years. But by the end of his reign, the country was cracking. The power was slipping, the regional leaders were rising, and the Nile floods grew unpredictable. In this shaky period, the mysterious doctor thrived. His tomb was discovered by a Swiss-French archaeological team in the shadows of old pyramids. The weirdest part was that when they uncovered his burial chamber, they found no body, no golden treasures either. Unfortunately, the tomb had been robbed long ago. But what remained was something even more fascinating: the words and images left on the walls. The paintings are still vibrant, bright colors that somehow survived all those years underground. The walls show jars, containers, strange abstract patterns, and geometric shapes. And then there are hieroglyphs, lines and lines of sacred script carved with precision, like someone had poured their soul into every curve. These inscriptions revealed who Tete-Nebe-Fu truly was. Turns out, he wasn't just any doctor. He was the conjurer of Serket. Now, Serket was the female deity of scorpions, sacred and terrifying. Egyptians believed she could stop venom, heal bites, and protect the living from toxic elements. The title Conjurer of Serket meant Tete Nebi Fu was a specialist in treating dangerous stings and bites. And if he got an entire tomb for himself, he may have been Egypt's top expert in those things, a man who healed with both medicine and magic. But that wasn't all. He also held the title Director of Medicinal Plants, a title seen only once before in all of ancient Egypt. That means he knew the healing power of herbs, roots, and oils like no one else. Now, you might wonder what plants in a huge land of sand, but in reality, ancient Egyptians used herbal medicine that would hold up in some labs today. They created pills, ointments, and inhalers. Most often, they chose some active ingredient, a flavor to make it easier to take, and something to deliver it into the body. Sound familiar? And yeah, they didn't have many traditional plants, so some of these ingredients were bizarre by our standards, like using crocodile dung and acacia mixed with honey. They even had formulas for anti-wrinkle creams. And apparently, our mysterious healer was also chief dentist. This title is almost never seen in ancient records. Evidence of Egyptian dentists is incredibly rare. Turns out, our ancient genius didn't just fight stings and study plants. He was also trusted with teeth and jaws, which were actually a huge problem in ancient Egypt. These people may have built wonders, but their teeth paid the price. Ancient Egyptians constantly caught grains of sand in their mouths. They often ate grit-filled bread and raw vegetables, which wore down enamel and caused a horrible condition called attrition. This led to tons of problems, including tooth loss. They had to improvise back in the day. For example, crafting the world's oldest known toothpaste from crushed rock, mint, and pepper, which ironically only made things worse for the gums. Or a toothpaste from things like eggshells, pumice, and natron, a salty mineral used for cleaning. They were also inventing mouthwashes from celery, bran, and herbs to ease the problem. Some mummies were even found with crude metal braces and gold wires attaching missing teeth. Though we're not sure if these were for the living, or was it just a nice little addition added as an afterlife gift. So, Tete Nebi Fu specialized in all these fields. 3 rare titles for one man. Now, back in the day, he must have been admired as incredibly knowledgeable. In a world without modern science, he would have been like a sorcerer who knows how some leaf or bark could save a life. That's why archaeologists believe Tete Nebi Fu wasn't just any doctor. He was, most likely, the royal physician, the one who treated the pharaoh himself. We don't know for sure which king he served. Maybe it was Pepi II, and who knows, maybe that's why the guy lived so long. But if that was the case, Tete Nebi Fu may have lived through the final moments of the Old Kingdom, watching the Golden Age crumble from inside the palace walls. And then he was buried. The body was looted, or perhaps just lost to time. But the team says they're still studying the tomb, still uncovering the traces of this incredible man. Overall, ancient Egyptians were practicing medicine on a crazy advanced level. Some practices feel familiar even today. They had hospitals, specialists, surgeries, and many more things, even medical schools. Both men and women were allowed to be doctors. They healed with various methods and practiced surgery with actual tools, scalpels, forceps, even sutures. Some doctors treated only the eyes, others the teeth, the stomach, or even what they called the hidden diseases. They knew how to clean and dress wounds, could set broken bones using splints made of wood or reeds wrapped in linen, and even prevented infections. There were even proctologists. They also built the first prosthetics, like a wooden toe with leather straps that help people walk normally again. The oldest known prosthetic is 3,000 years old. Now, the most shocking part is how they actually even tried to remove tumors. A recent study looked at a 4,000 years old skull. It belonged to a man in his 30s. There were signs of past tumors, and around 3 of them, there were marks, surgical cuts made with a metal tool. That suggests someone attempted to remove or study them, maybe treatment, maybe an autopsy. There was another skull of a woman over 50 years old. It also showed similar signs, but with healed fractures from an earlier injury, which is amazing because her treatment might have actually been successful. Being a healer in this society meant something powerful. It meant being a priest, a scientist, and a magician all at once. To ancient Egyptians, medicine was a necessary art, and they treated it with as much reverence as they did their deities. That's because they believed that sickness could be both physical and spiritual. So a doctor could recite a spell while applying a salve, and a lot of their treatments worked. The reputation of doctors in ancient Egypt was so strong that leaders from other parts of the ancient world, like Persia, actually sought them out. Even Homer, the Greek poet, once said the Egyptians were the most skilled healers of all. Of course, their understanding of the human body wasn't perfect. For example, they thought the heart controlled thought and emotion. They also didn't know what the brain really did. But their approach, observe symptoms, diagnose, and treat, well, that's modern medicine. Sure, they prayed over the wound, but they also healed it, didn't they? Their most famous physician was Imhotep. That guy was a true polymath, an architect, priest, and a healer who became so revered he was later worshipped as a deity of medicine. Yep, a human who was so cool they turned him into a deity. He lived 2,000 years before Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine. And yet, some people joke we should drop the Hippocratic Oath altogether and swear an Imhotepic oath instead. These people weren't just laying the foundations of pyramids, they were laying the foundations of healthcare.
When you hear the word mummy, you might get a chill down your spine. That's because most of us associate this word with those creepy characters we've seen in some scary movies. But in reality, mummies have helped us understand a lot about ancient civilizations, their rulers, and about how people used to deal with losing their loved ones. The people most famous worldwide for their mummies are the ancient Egyptians. They believed that some sort of existence after passing away was possible, if certain conditions were met. That's why they insisted on preserving the human body through the process of mummification and placing the mummy in a furnished tomb, kind of like giving it a fully functioning apartment of its own. Why did they believe in this? Well, because they were deeply connected to their natural environment for the most part. They saw the natural cycles around them, like how the sun rose every day, followed by the moon, or how new life was always sprouting from plants, even after they had wilted away. They also believed that the powerful spirit Osiris, who represented the cycle of passing away and resurrection, played a role in this process. To prepare for the afterlife, the ancient Egyptians followed certain rituals, like mummification, which involved using materials like honey, resins, and incense to preserve the body. There's no other mummy more popular than that of King Tut. He was a young pharaoh who ruled over 3,000 years ago in Egypt. The problem with discovering ancient royal tombs is that most of such burial sites were previously robbed. People knew ancient rulers had been left with many valuable belongings, so those locations became vulnerable to thieves. When King Tut's tomb was opened in 1922, people were excited because it had not been robbed, like many other previously discovered royal tombs. That's how well hidden it was. Inside, his mummy was encapsulated in a total of 3 coffins, including one made of gold. The objects found in his tomb showed us what ancient Egypt was like, and studying his mummy also helped us learn about the culture and practices popular at the time when he passed away. We also learned about his family by looking at his DNA. Scientists were able to discover that he had had a disease called malaria and a problem with his foot that might have made it hard for him to walk. Ramses II was another pharaoh in Egypt who ruled for 68 years, which was quite a lot back in the day. He was known for his expansion campaigns and building projects. Many objects from his time as a ruler still exist today, including a large statue of him. Ramses II was about 6 feet tall and lived to be about 90 years old. After looking at his mummy, scientists concluded that he may have had a medical condition that affected his spine. Now, remember those thieves I mentioned before? They are probably the reason why Ramses II ended up in a plain coffin in a secret collection of royal mummies at Deir al-Bahari, which was rediscovered in 1881. Thankfully, archaeologists were able to identify him because his journeys had been recorded on his wrappings. The process was really tedious too. In fact, in ancient Egypt, the mummification process could take a staggering 70 days to complete. A special person would say a very specific speech while delicately handling the body and drying it out using a type of salt called natron. They also used linen and resin to make the body look more lifelike and to wrap it in cloth. The tomb was equally as important for ancient Egyptians. The walls of King Tut's tomb, for example, were adorned with intricate artwork that depicted his journey to the afterlife, from his burial procession to his passage through the underworld. The ancient Egyptians believed that everyone made this journey after passing away, and they filled their tombs with items and paintings to help the person in their spiritual travels. Additionally, the walls of the tomb were decorated with spells from a special book, which contained a collection of poems that the Egyptians believed would help people reach the afterlife. And speaking of how important this journey was, people also placed food in these ancient tombs. In King Tut's tomb, archaeologists discovered 36 jars of vintage beverages and 8 baskets of fruit, which were believed to be left there to help him in his journey to the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that traveling to the afterlife took a really long time, so they left a lot of supplies, such as food and water, to sustain their loved ones. Pharaohs also generally had numerous luxurious garments and beautiful jewelry in their tombs to ensure that they would have a fashionable journey. These items included various types of linen clothing, such as tunics, scarves, gloves, and headdresses, as well as a lot of gold jewelry with precious stones, like bracelets, buckles, pendants, necklaces, rings, and even precious depictions of insects for protection. Some were also deposited with fans made from ivory and ostrich feathers to keep them cool in the afterlife. Some ancient rulers were even placed in their forever apartments along with boats. For example, Pharaoh Khufu built the Great Pyramid at Giza as his tomb, and a large ship was found inside. King Tut, however, was buried with multiple boat paddles, but no actual boat. Instead, he had 3 chariots and numerous walking sticks made of precious materials, perhaps indicating he'd rather travel to the beyond by land, not by water. Amongst the most interesting objects found near ancient mummies are bottles of oils and perfumes. If rulers were supposed to be fashionable, why not smell nice too, right? Also, some of them had some ancient kinds of board games, most of them made out of precious materials like gold or ivory. One of those games was called Senet. It was very popular amongst the ancient Egyptians and very similar to modern-day chess. The ancient Egyptians may have the most famous mummies out there, but they weren't the first to invent the procedure. In fact, it all started in South America with an ancient civilization named the Chinchorro. As far as we know today, these people were the first to mummify their loved ones that had passed away. They did it somewhere around 2,000 years before the Egyptians started their own rituals. Sure, we can tell a lot about ancient rulers by studying these mummies, but until recently, we had no idea what they really looked like during their lifetime. Not so long ago, though, some very special mummy paintings were found by archaeologists studying ancient Egyptian objects. These mummy portraits are highly detailed paintings of individuals that were made while they were still alive. Such paintings were often painted on wood, as opposed to the classical portraits we all know about, which are painted on canvas. They are known for their realism and beauty, and have even been used by researchers to diagnose diseases by comparing them to the corresponding mummies. Some of these portraits also include depictions of jewelry, which was later found on the mummies. The recent discovery of these mummy portraits in Central Egypt is significant, as it marks the first time in over a century that such paintings have been found. Mummies appeared all around the world naturally, too. Mummification can occur without people intervening because of natural conditions, like extremely cold or hot environments, places with a lack of oxygen, or accidental exposure to chemicals that preserve the body. These conditions don't allow bacteria to grow, resulting in the body remaining more or less intact. Famous Otzi was one of these mummies. We know today he was a man who lived around 5,000 years ago in Europe. But upon his discovery in the Alps in 1991, Austrian authorities initially believed that he was a modern mountaineer because of how well preserved the body was. However, after the Iceman was removed from the glacier, it was determined that he was actually from the Copper Age.
It's nighttime, and you're about to walk inside Pharaoh Tutankhamun's final resting place. You know, King Tut. You don't have a torch, but at least you came with a flashlight. You walk down several flights of stairs and observe how the walls are carved in hieroglyphics and what looks like a spell. Those who take anything from this place will be doomed for life, the spell says. Even if you don't really believe it, this scares you a little bit. You find a huge stone door. Is it a trap? You manage to open it, but oh no, it's only an empty chamber. You check your map. It seems like you're heading in the right direction. After what feels like hours, you realize you must be trapped inside a labyrinth. You try to retrace your steps, but you can't find the door where you came in from anymore. That's it, you think to yourself. You've fallen for the Pharaoh's trap. What's worse, you didn't bring a lunch. Okay, so we've all seen Hollywood movies where the main character is exploring ancient ruins and faces some seriously dangerous traps, right? We've been told Egyptian royalty protected their final resting places with venomous scorpions and snakes, sliding doors that will trap you for life, and giant rolling boulders that will crush anyone on their paths. The thing is, were these traps truly real? Well, I regret to be the one to break it to you, but this is all fiction. These elaborate traps were too technologically advanced for ancient civilizations to pull off. That is not to say, however, that there weren't any traps at all. Ancient civilizations, like the Egyptians and the Mayans, are known for their practice of building entire monuments dedicated to the ones who had passed away. These structures would often reflect the position of person occupied in society. So, for the really important people, the VIPs of their times, massive monuments were built to host their bodies long after they were gone. Some of these civilizations believed that a person's life would continue on the other side of the veil. For that reason, a person would be buried together with the belongings of their current life. If they had a lot of money and power and stuff, that meant their resting places would be filled with riches and gold. Now imagine if you lived in ancient Egypt and you knew exactly where all the pharaohs' tombs were located and had heard rumors of the amount of wealth kept in these places. Maybe you would be tempted to go check it out, right? We're talking about large rooms filled from floor to ceiling with golden artifacts, jewels, and even money. I mean, it does sound tempting. And since there weren't any security guards protecting the entrance of these places, Egyptians needed to get creative as to how they would protect these riches. These old civilizations found some traps to be useful. A recurring one was building empty rooms inside the monument to confuse a burglar. Now, let's take a look at Amenhotep III's final resting place as an example. It was built in the city of Luxor, in a spot also known as the Western Valley of the Kings. Two French engineers originally discovered the monument between 1905 and 1914 CE. The structure is huge and has more than 10 chambers, connected by long corridors and steep stairways. The King's Chamber is the most hidden one, and for an outsider to try and find it, they will probably enter a lot of empty rooms beforehand. Other pharaohs tried to protect their riches by commissioning monuments with false doors concealing pits that were up to 20 feet deep. This way, an unwarned and unwanted visitor would be surprised by the deep hole on their way to the king's resting chamber. Alongside false doors, pharaohs made sure to build labyrinth-style corridors and false walls. This way, robbers could take hours or days before they found the king's real chamber. As to pits with poisonous snakes on them, if there were any reptiles inside these monuments, they probably got inside on their own. and would most likely not stay there for long. There is no way snakes would survive years and years without food inside these pits. So yes, another Hollywood-induced belief right there. If these traps seem boring to you, archaeologists did find an interesting deterrent in the final resting place of the Red Queen of Palenque in Mexico. Palenque was one of the most powerful Mayan cities in pre-Columbian Mexico, and the Red Queen was believed to be the grandmother of the last Mayan king, undoubtedly a person of immense importance to the empire. In her honor, a huge monument was built to keep her body after her passing. The discovery of the tomb itself was already thrilling. Archaeologists found an ancient monument when digging at the site back in 1994. The first thing they found was a room with a hidden door. Once they opened the door, they discovered a long corridor. Finally, at the end of this corridor was the Queen's chamber. The team of archaeologists was beyond excited to unearth this chamber with the mummy of the Queen herself still inside it. They found her to be accompanied by her pearls, jade shells, and expensive rocks. But as the team explored the remains, they saw something rather strange. The room was filled with a red-colored powder. Researchers knew that the color red was important to the Mayan people, and that much of their clothing and buildings were decorated with this color. But they didn't understand why the queen was buried with this unknown red substance. After they took a sample back with them for further analysis, they discovered that the red powder was cinnabar, a very dangerous mineral. This powder, when inhaled, can cause, shall we say, severe health damage to a person. The team concluded that this could only be a trap for anyone trying to steal her riches. Okay, so dangerous powders might have worked as the most intense traps we've seen until now. But perhaps the cheapest way to keep out unwanted visitors was to advertise spells written out all over the monument. We'd probably laugh at these today, but back in the day, they were more or less effective. Spells usually said that the person who took anything from that place would meet a tragic fate. Some spells said that robbers would lose their houses in big fires or terrible floods. Other spells said burglars would have incurable and undiagnosed health issues, but they weren't really enough to stop people from taking any gold. There are some stories surrounding how these spells might have been real. One of them is from the famous British Egyptologist Howard Carter, the one responsible for unearthing Pharaoh Tutankhamun's resting place in the 1920s. After months of unsuccessful digging, Carter discovered the tomb's existence by chance. He found the entrance to a stairway right beneath the soil where he had been searching all those months. With the help of a team, he cleared the piles of sand blocking the stairs and discovered a doorway. The door had several royal symbols carved into it, and Carter knew this could only mean a very important person had been buried there. And he was right. With a chisel, he made a hole in the top left-hand corner of the doorway and lit his vision with the help of a candle. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, the reflection of several golden and jeweled items crowding the chamber before him. Lost for 3,000 years, Carter had just discovered the final resting place of King Tut. But the story didn't finish here. This discovery was accompanied by a series of unfortunate events that led people to believe it had something to do with the Pharaoh spell. Carter himself mysteriously passed away just a few years later, and some of his assistants lost their houses in floods, just like one of the spells threatened. Some say it's just coincidental, as there's no real proof of these things being connected. Well, what do you think? Was this an effective trap after all? Hey, if you think Stonehenge is one of the oldest stone monuments ever, well, let me introduce you to Göbekli Tepe. Buckle up, we gotta travel to Turkey to meet this really old guy. Yeah, he's too old to travel. Jokes aside, Göbekli Tepe, an archaeological site located in southeastern Turkey that dates back to the Neolithic period, around 10,000 BCE. It's considered to be one of the oldest and most significant archaeological discoveries in recent times. The site consists of a series of circular and rectangular structures made of stone pillars. Yeah, it does look like its younger brother Stonehenge. Some of those pillars are decorated with intricate carvings of animals and other symbols. Now, you maybe wonder, hey, why on earth did they make such a fascinating building? What was its purpose? Sorry, I got no answer for that. The purpose of the site is still unknown, but it is believed to have been a ceremonial center for the ancient people who lived in the area. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe has challenged long-held beliefs about the development of human civilization, as it suggests that complex societies may have emerged much earlier than previously thought. Okay, pack your stuff, our travels just started. Next destination, Masada. It's an ancient fortress located in Israel on a plateau overlooking the Dead Sea. Hey, look at that view, spectacular, huh? It was built by King Herod the Great in the 1st century BCE, and it was very smartly built. Within the fortress, there were various facilities such as storehouses, barracks, a palace, and a set of cisterns capable of holding approximately 40,000 cubic meters of rainwater. People living there believed that the collected runoff from a single day's rainfall could provide sustenance for over 1,000 individuals for a period of 2 to 3 years. Access to the fortress was limited to 3 steep and winding paths leading up to fortified gates. Still, at one point, the fortress was occupied by people who had fled Jerusalem after the city was captured by the Romans. They held out against the invaders for several months, but eventually they were defeated. But these guys didn't surrender. The story of Masada has become a symbol of resistance and bravery. Today, Masada is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The next flight is going to be short. We're popping over to Egypt to see the Karnak Temple Complex. It's a vast ancient Egyptian temple complex located in the city of Luxor, Egypt. It was built over a period of 2,000 years and covers an area of more than 200 acres. The complex is dedicated to the worship of the deity Amun-Roka. Wait a minute, that should be Amun-Ra, and it was one of the most important religious centers in ancient Egypt. The Karnak Temple consists of several temples, chapels, and other buildings, including the Great Temple of Amun, the Temple of Khonsu, and the Temple of Ptah. Ptah! The Great Temple of Amun is the largest and most impressive temple in the complex, with massive columns, statues, and other decorations. One of the most famous features of the Karnak Temple complex is the Avenue of Sphinxes, which is a long avenue lined with Sphinx statues that leads from the entrance of the complex to the Great Temple of Amun. Another notable feature is the Hypostyle Hall, which is a massive hall with 134 columns that are over 70 feet high. The Karnak Temple Complex is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's considered one of the most important archaeological sites in Egypt and provides a fascinating glimpse into the religion and culture of ancient Egypt. Hey, we can't hop on the next flight and leave Egypt until we see the Pyramid of Djoser. It has another name, by the way. It's also known as the Step Pyramid. This ancient Egyptian site is located in Sakara. It was built during the 27th century BCE for the Pharaoh Djoser by his architect Imhotep, who is considered one of the most important figures in Egyptian history. People believe this pyramid is the first monumental structure built entirely of stone and is an important example of early Egyptian architecture. The pyramid originally stood at 203 feet tall and was surrounded by a complex of buildings and courtyards. It was constructed in 6 layers, each smaller than the one below it, giving it the distinctive step-like appearance. The pyramid was used as a burial place for Pharaoh Djoser and was surrounded by a vast necropolis that contained the tombs of many other important officials. The Grateful Dead? The Pyramid of Djoser has several renovations and additions over the centuries, including the addition of a limestone casing that covered the original step structure. However, much of the pyramid was destroyed over time, and today only the central core remains. Despite this, it remains an important archaeological site and a popular tourist attraction in Egypt. Alrighty, we're ready to move on. There's one more pretty recent discovery we gotta see today. The Tower of Jericho was only discovered during excavations in the 1950s and 60s. It's an ancient stone tower located in the city of Jericho in the West Bank. Just like Göbekli Tepe, this one is believed to be one of the oldest stone structures in the world, dating back to approximately 8000 BCE. The tower stands at over 28 feet tall. It's made up of two main sections, an inner tower and an outer tower, which are connected by a series of stairs. The purpose of the Tower of Jericho is not entirely clear, but it is believed to have served as a defensive structure or a watchtower. It may have also had religious significance, as it was located near a sacred spring. The Tower of Jericho is a significant archaeological site and has provided valuable insights into the early history of human civilization. It's open to visitors and is a popular destination for tourists interested in ancient history. Now, this ancient site even got attention from Netflix, and they made a movie where the action takes place in Mohenjo-Daro. This site was a major center of the Indus Valley civilization in present-day Pakistan. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the largest cities of the ancient world, with a population estimated to have been around 40,000 in its peak. Trust me, that must have been a crazy megalopolis back then. The city was notable for its advanced urban planning, with sophisticated drainage and sanitation systems, and its impressive architecture, including the Great Bath and the Granary. Mohenjo-Daro was abandoned around 1900 BCE, and its ruins were only rediscovered in the 1920s. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and an important archaeological site for the study of ancient South Asian civilization. We're heading to a teeny-tiny country that has quite an impressive history. Welcome to Malta. The Gigantia Temples are a Neolithic site located on the Mediterranean island of Gozo. They're probably one of the oldest freestanding structures in the world, dating back to around 3600 to 3200 BCE. The temples consist of two megalithic structures, each with multiple rooms and altars. The name Gigantia means giant tower in Maltese, as people believe that only giants could have built such massive structures. The temples are believed to have been used for religious purposes and are considered to be an important example of prehistoric architecture. They were added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1980. Well, you must be pretty tired, but there's one more place we gotta visit today. Our plane is already landing in Armenia, and we're here to see the Temple of Garni. Look, this one is well preserved. This temple dates back to the 1st century CE. It was built by King Tiridates I as a dedication to the sun deity Mir. Sadly, the temple was destroyed in the 17th century during an earthquake, which is quite a common thing for this area, but it was later reconstructed in the 20th century. Today, it's a popular tourist attraction and is also listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Whenever you hear about ancient ruins, you almost never picture them being suspended somewhere, or just randomly hanging on the branch of a tree, right? In fact, for most of the ancient artifacts we have exposed in museums all over the world, archaeologists did quite an impressive amount of digging. You see, buildings have this funny way of fading away over time if not properly taken care of. Sometimes we need to reuse some building materials, so an older construction may be sacrificed in the process. Other times, houses are abandoned, and once they are exposed to the elements on the surface, like rain or sunlight, they don't really stand a chance. Some just simply crumble away due to good old erosion. So the only way a piece of architecture can survive the test of time is if it's somehow gotten buried deep down. Now, how did they end up buried in the first place? Well, it's quite the comedy of errors. Ancient cities had a habit of gradually raising their ground level like a kid adding toppings to their ice cream sundae. You see, these settlements were always busy collecting food and building materials to keep up with their ever-growing population. But hey, who has time to deal with waste and rubbish? It wasn't exactly high on their to-do list back in the day. So when it came to building new houses, Ancient civilizations found it much easier to save their sweat and tears by piling up the rubble and constructing right on top. But that's not all. Rivers would also occasionally flood and deposit a layer of sediment on the city floors, further encapsulating those ancient constructions. And in those dry regions like the desert, where the wind likes to show off its sand and dust dance moves, you can bet it was a constant struggle to keep the establishments clean. One hilarious example is the Sphinx, which had its head buried in sand until a group of archaeologists unearthed it in 1817. Some ancient towns eventually got covered up because they were completely abandoned. With less human activity to control their expansion, plant seeds couldn't resist the opportunity and sprouted all over the place. They gobbled up carbon dioxide from the air and grew, adding more and more bulk to the ground. Those cheeky roots even decided to stabilize the soil made from decaying plant matter, creating layers upon layers of earthy goodness. It's like the ultimate DIY project Mother Nature embarked on, with plants as her loyal helpers. The act of digging into the secrets of ancient civilizations is not just about unearthing a lost world. It's also an epic quest to reveal the hidden treasures beneath layers of history. But how do archaeologists know where to dig in the first place? If everything is covered in layers upon layers of sediments, debris, and plant roots, they must have some sort of system they rely on before embarking on a new project, right? For starters, they're not always the ones suggesting an archaeological dig in a certain location. Let me explain. Let's say you're a contractor and you want to build a new fancy apartment complex in your city. Some local legislations have certain requirements before your project can start, though. For instance, before anyone starts building on a piece of land, they might need to bring in specialists to check the soil. These clever folks can be archaeologists, geologists, or paleontologists, and they need to keep an eye on things during development. If any artifacts or ecofacts, fancy word for organic remnants, are discovered, these experts swoop in to excavate and study them. But what about sites that have nothing to do with bulldozers and yellow hats? Archaeologists have more than one trick up their sleeves when it comes to locating ancient hotspots. They dive deep into historic records with a healthy dose of detective work. By sniffing out old documents and maps, they can piece together the puzzle of human activity in a specific area. If a site has been visited before, it's even better. Finding records of past excavations or historical accounts can give archaeologists lots of information on where to continue their treasure hunt. Before archaeologists start swinging their shovels, they engage in a bit of a visual scan mission. Armed with a grid system, they'll stroll around the site, keeping their eyes peeled for any artifacts that might be hiding just beneath the Earth's upper layer. From groundstone tools to historic glass and even ancient garbage dumps, yes, they're also valuable. These keen-eyed explorers can spot signs of human activity faster than most people. If they stumble upon midden soil, fancy term for a garbage dump, they know for sure that humans once called this place home. Archaeologists don't just rely on their trusty shovels, though. They have an arsenal of gadgets to aid in their search for hidden wonders. Geophysical tools are like their secret weapons. Take the resistivity meter, for example. This clever contraption measures the electrical component of the soil and any buried features or artifacts. A buried wall, for instance, will create a different resistivity reading than the surrounding soil. Magnetometers and ground-penetrating radar work in similar ways, showcasing potential hints of ancient treasures in the soil. And who could forget our trusty old friend, the GPS? It helps archaeologists map out precise locations, like a high-tech treasure map, leading them straight to their pot of gold. Care to virtually visit some of the most important archaeological sites in the world? Well, follow me. In the United Kingdom, for instance, you'll find this interesting place called Stonehenge. It's one of many henges scattered around, but this one really takes the cake. Picture this: massive ancient stones standing tall and proud, arranged in a funky outer ring and an inner horseshoe, with some smaller stones thrown in for good measure. And guess what? These amazing stones have been around for over 5,000 years. Talk about a serious case of rock-solid longevity. Now, here's where it gets interesting. According to local folklore, the legendary wizard Merlin whipped out his magic wand and poof! He teleported these massive stones all the way from Ireland. Apparently some giants had assembled them there, but Merlin decided they would look much better at their new location. Others think it's just the ruined remains of an old Roman spiritual edifice. These amazing structures were built by our Bronze Age ancestors. With their simple tools and limited tech, they managed to create this monumental masterpiece. Impressive, right? Unfortunately, there's still so much we don't know about this area. Stonehenge's initial purpose remains a mystery to this day. Sure, there are lots of theories, but scientists have yet to agree on the subject. However, we do know that it's perfectly aligned to catch the sunrise during the summer and winter solstices. The ancient city of Pompeii is an equally amazing archaeological site. Picture this. Mount Vesuvius, a notorious troublemaker, decided to throw a volcanic tantrum and completely covered this ancient Roman city. It turned it into a time capsule, located outside present-day Naples in Italy. Fast forward to the year 1748, when a bunch of adventurous explorers stumbled upon Pompeii. Lo and behold, they discovered a treasure trove of well-preserved goodies: streets, houses, food. Probably a bit stale by then. Blingy jewelry, fancy sculptures, colorful frescoes, everyday household items, and even animal and human remains. It was like an epic archaeological party. From the looks of it, Pompeii had it all. Fancy houses and villas, a massive 20,000-seat arena, cute little artisan shops, hangouts like taverns. And let's not forget the saucy spots like those luxurious bathhouses for some intense pampering. There's also the Sanctuary of Apollo, where people used to gather for their daily dose of worship. And of course, the bustling heart of the city, the Forum of Pompeii, where all the cool people used to hang out. And guess what? Pompeii is so cool that it made it to UNESCO's World Heritage List back in 1997. That's like the ultimate Hall of Fame for historical awesomeness. It also includes many other famous buildings and sites, like the Taj Mahal in India and the Acropolis of Athens in Greece.
There's nothing around, just the eternal, endless whiteness of Greenland's snow and cold winds blowing into your face. Nothing hints at the impending catastrophe. You take another step and freeze in horror. An abyss is spreading at your feet, bottomless and dark. If you had made a bigger step, it would have swallowed you. That infamous Greenland's hole. It happened in the middle of the 2010s. A group of geologists were scanning the surface of Greenland's Hiawatha Glacier using radar when they spotted something very, very strange. It was a giant pit, more than 980 feet deep and almost 20 miles wide. That's big enough to fit inside Washington, D.C. or Paris. After staring at their radars for quite a while and scratching their heads, researchers decided to find out what could have made such a huge hole. Could it have been good old erosion, a raging volcano, an asteroid impact, a giant sandworm? Ugh, I might have gone a bit overboard with this worm idea, but you never know with these ancient glaciers. Anyway, in our case, one mystery seemed to lead to another, which had been puzzling scientists for decades. And to solve both of them, scientists needed something super common, but at the same time very important: quartz. One of the most abundant materials in Earth's crust. But before we dig deeper into this topic, let's make a small detour and talk about a pretty bizarre phenomenon called the Younger Dryas event. To see what it was like, we need to go deep into the past, as far back as 12,900 to 11,600 years ago. During that period, the planet became much colder, especially in Europe and North America. Now, let's talk a bit more about that weird climate change in the Northern Hemisphere. There are a few theories. One that involves a change in currents in the Atlantic Ocean. Another speaks about something large kicking tons of dust into the air and effectively blocking sunlight. The two most popular and likely hypotheses mention a volcanic eruption and an asteroid impact. Indeed, there was a volcanic eruption on the territory of modern-day Germany at around the right time. But there's also a probability that a space object struck the planet during this period too. And now let's get back to the hole scientists found in Greenland. When NASA's Ice Bridge program and Germany's Alfred Wegener Institute discovered it, it seemed they had finally found the reason for the Younger Dryas event. But was it really an asteroid that created that impressive pit and caused temperatures to drop all over the Northern Hemisphere? To test this theory, the researchers needed quartz. The thing is, in its pure form, quartz has a very simple structure. It's made from interlocking silicon-oxygen tetrahedra. Efficient and so pretty. Just look at these six-sided prismatic crystals. Since its structure is so simple and the components are so common, you can find quartz almost in any rock on the planet. At one point, magic happens. Larger rocks erode away, pushing out tiny bits of quartz sand. The scientists exploring the mysterious pit gathered the quartz sand that had been washed out from underneath a glacier. It was like looking at the rocks at the very bottom of the hole without having to actually get all the way down there. Very handy. So, while examining the material, they discovered quartz grains with the telltale signs of terrible catastrophe. They had PDFs all over them. No, I'm not talking about the document format. PDFs stand for planar deformation features, and they look like lines etched into the crystal surface. These lines are a sign that you're holding shocked quartz. It forms under immense pressure, when the internal crystals are pushed out of alignment. But the most exciting thing here is that shocked quartz only appears under the influence of powerful forces, like massive impacts or terrifying explosions. In other words, finding this poor shocked quartz under the Hiawatha Glacier could be much needed proof that the hole was an enormous impact crater that formed when something equally enormous crash-landed there. Based on the size of the crater, this space object probably was a bit more than a mile across, which is twice the height of the Burj Khalifa Tower in Dubai. A meteorite that big would have looked 3 times as bright as the sun when traveling across the sky, and it would have hit Earth with an immense force. The impact would have been so great it'd have vaporized rock and thrown debris for hundreds of miles away. The sky would have filled with dust. It would have dimmed the sun and led to a temperature drop all over the planet. And guess what? The last part about decreasing temperatures got the researchers super excited, because it opened up a possibility that the impact could have been connected to the Younger Dryas event. To prove this idea, scientists decided to use quartz again. They examined it more closely, trying to date the impact. Well, they were in for an even greater shock. The Hiawatha crater turned out to be not 12,000, but 58 million years old. On the other hand, the researchers were disappointed that they hadn't been able to confirm their theory. The crater couldn't explain the Younger Dryas cold snap, but on the other hand, it was still an amazing discovery. Now, get ready for one final twist to this story, and it revolves around quartz again. Other scientists have recently discovered more deposits of shocked quartz all over what is now the eastern USA. It was hiding in sediment layers dating to just before the Younger Dryas. Interestingly, there aren't any craters around those sites whatsoever. But quartz can't lie. It provides evidence of a powerful explosion. It makes scientists think that their impact hypothesis might still be true, but instead of a collision, it could be an airburst. A massive comet could have broken up while entering Earth's atmosphere around 12,000 years ago, and the fragments could have exploded before reaching the ground. It would have caused catastrophic mass burning throughout the North American continent and messed with the climate so much that the Younger Dryas would have been triggered. Well, I guess we need to wait a bit longer for scientists to find some further proof of this hypothesis. But it doesn't mean we don't have any more curious phenomena to explore in Greenland. Take these fascinating holes. They sure are kinda smaller than the monster we were talking about. They're called moulins, and they carry surface meltwater all the way down to the base of the Greenland ice sheet. And they have prepared some surprises for us too. Apparently, they're way larger than we previously thought. That's what a recent study based on observation and first-hand exploration claims. Even more interesting, this high volume might influence the stability of the ginormous ice sheet in question, as well as the speed at which it's sliding towards the sea. Researchers think that increased water depth and pressure inside moulins might lubricate the base of the ice sheet, making it move faster. You know, the way an ice cube slides more easily on a thin film of melted water. Until recently, we knew too little about the real size of moulins and how much water they can hold. But now, we know that moulins can be giant. The team made 2 trips to the Greenland ice sheet in 2018 and 2019. And during each of them, they used ropes and climbing equipment to drop around 330 feet into 2 separate moulins, almost touching the water's surface. Those who did it described the experience as intimidating. Picture this. Your back is over the edge. All you see is bluish ice going down and blurring into blackness. And the only thing you hear is occasional sounds of crashing ice. It must be extremely unnerving. In 1936, British Egyptologist Walter Bryan Emery found a small object in the desert that made people debate whether it was an elaborate stone model of a flying saucer or even a hyperdrive from a spaceship that belonged to some advanced civilization that visited the Earth. Emery spent years excavating sites along the Nile River Valley, especially in the huge ancient necropolis of Sakara. He found countless treasures from ancient Egypt, and the most bizarre one was definitely from the tomb of a high official, Sabu. Historians don't know exactly who he was for sure. Some sources say he was a king's son. His burial at Sakara means he was an important figure in the royal court. There are no records from this early period he lived in, so Sabu's role and fate are still a mystery. Inside his tomb, scientists found 7 funerary chambers, each filled with traditional grave goods: animal bones, flint tools, pottery, ivory objects, and stone bowls. And then there was a strange, broken artifact that became famous as the Disc of Sabu. It resembles a shallow, round-bottomed bowl, but with 3 delicately carved, curved lobes spaced roughly 120 degrees apart around its perimeter. These lobes are separated by 3 holes, and at the center, there's a thin tube. The material used to build the disc is metasiltstone, or schist. This type of rock is fragile, highly porous, and super difficult to carve. It flakes easily and crumbles under pressure. So how they made the disc out of it with rather simple stone and copper tools from 3000 BCE is still a mystery. The next big question is why they decided to bury Sabu with it. Perhaps if we knew its true purpose, it would make more sense. When it was first discovered, archaeologists thought it was nothing more than a vase, an incense burner, or a ceremonial decoration. But those who took a closer look from the point of view of an engineer decided it could actually be a component of a larger mechanism. An amateur historian made an exact copy of the artifact with a 3D printer, and it turned out that the Disc of Sabu was an ancient impeller, a crucial part of a centrifugal pump. When they put it in a housing and span at high speeds using the small central shaft, the disc was able to displace water. When it was tested without a housing, the disc created a powerful vortex. It became clear that the curved lobes and slightly concave shape of the disc weren't random. It was probably all engineered to move water with remarkable efficiency, like a powerful pump mechanism. Ancient Egypt's entire civilization depended on irrigation. Later dynasties perfected basin irrigation and managed to control the rise and fall of the Nile to take the most from agriculture. So, the engineers of the first dynasty may have been experimenting with advanced irrigation techniques thousands of years earlier than scientists previously thought. But then again, some people have doubts schist is strong enough to be used for a pumping mechanism. They suggest that artisans from Egypt's first dynasty were trying to recreate an even older object, using whatever tools and materials they had. It could be a stone replica of something originally made from metal, possibly belonging to a civilization far older and more advanced than ancient Egypt itself. One Swiss author takes this idea even further and proposes that the disc is a copy of a component from an extraterrestrial spaceship's hyperdrive, or stone model of a flying saucer. One French researcher believes the disk of Sabu was part of a secret massive factory system to manufacture sodium carbonate inside pyramids. Some people suggest that the disk may have been a primitive tool for weaving ropes. The lobes held strands of silk or fiber that were twisted into twine when it was spun. Or it may have been a gigantic lamp. Another historical mystery is a map from 1513 that is believed to be the oldest surviving detailed map showing the Americas. The author of the map is a Turkish captain, Piri Reis. He never crossed the ocean himself and put together this map from 20 regional maps. He used an Arab map of India, 4 Portuguese maps showing India and China, and a map of America by Christopher Columbus as he saw it. This last map was lost for many years, so Reis's map gave us an idea of what Columbus must have recorded during his 3rd voyage to the New World. A historian who studied the map suggested that it showed Antarctica in prehistoric times because it strangely resembled Antarctica's true coastline, the way it looked when it was free of ice. But it was later proven that this idea wasn't right. Another idea that rocked the science world was Klerksdorp spheres. They were found in deposits of mineral pyrophyllite in South Africa and looked like tiny ancient cricket balls with lines around the middle. Back in the 1980s, there was a theory that some super advanced pre-flood civilization we know nothing about had made these spheres. One journalist shared stories about how they rotated on their own in a display case. There was also a TV show that invited a psychic who was telling everyone the spheres were pieces of an ancient spaceship. But according to geologists, these spheres are pretty regular spherical objects formed from different minerals than the surrounding rock. The seam-like lines on them are just imprints from the host rock's layers building up over time. The Klerksdorp spheres come in different shapes, from flattened spheres to distinct discs. As for that episode when one of these spheres spun on its own, the curator of the Klerksdorp Museum cleared that up too. He said that when he put one sphere on its glass shelf when the journalist came to visit, the sphere rotated a bit because it's round. There are some gold mining activities going on nearby, so the land where the museum stands often experiences earth tremors. In a remote part of China, there are some bizarre pipe-like formations known as the Beigong Pipes. A local explorer found them back in 1996 protruding from Mount Beigong and along the shores of Tosan Lake nearby. Some people thought they were the work of ancient guests from other planets. When scientists tested samples of the pipe material, they found out that they contained mostly common minerals, but there was a mysterious 8% of unknown stuff. Some extra tests showed that these pipes had been there before humans. Chinese geologists later visited the site and suggested that these pipes were formed naturally over time. It was probably fossilized tree roots from the area's super green past. It's still a real mystery with no clear-cut answer. While digging a trench along a river in Romania, workers found a wedge, which is now famous as the aluminum wedge of Ajud, or the object of Ajud. Right next to it, there were some mastodon bones. Those distant relatives of elephants lived 11,000 years ago. So some people concluded the wedge is of the same age. The cool part is that it's made of aluminum, but this metal wasn't discovered until the 1800s. This material requires serious heat to produce. The wedge is said to be covered in a thick layer of oxide that's been sitting there for hundreds of years. Some folks believe this wedge must have crash-landed here on a spacecraft from some other planet. Some scientists think it's all a hoax, and others suppose it might be a human-made object with an unknown purpose.